What makes a memory of a single moment in time last a lifetime? Now, I'm not talking about those brief moments of trauma or bad news or sadness. I'm talking about the little moments, the everyday moments, the moments that at the time seem so inconsequential, so ordinary, so mundane, but which lodge in your mind and in your heart and last you the rest of your life, and even help shape who you become. I had one of those moments many, many years ago. It's the early 1960s, in a very, very small town in the Midwest. A bright, warm spring day, not long before school was going to let out, and I was about to graduate from first grade. Our little town had but two schools, the high school and what was known as the grade school, which housed grades 1 through 8. We had no kindergarten. Most of the kids were bussed in from nearby farms. But we lived across the street. Now, this particular spring day, it was so warm and so bright and inviting, I could practically taste summer vacation. So when the final bell rang, I darted to the front door, along with all the other kids. And while most of them piled into the buses, I ran down the long sidewalk in front of the school toward the end of the block, where I could cross the street. We had no crossing guard. The street was little more than a barely paved, barely 2-lane wide road, named after the big city that was a couple of hours away, as though you could stay on that little tiny road and eventually wind up in that big city. In fact, it routinely had so little traffic that one of my hobbies on non-school days was to sit in my living room in front of the picture window and count the cars. On a good day, I might make it into triple digits. As I crossed the street and approached our house, a big old white, cold, clapboard house with an enclosed front porch, I spotted Mom in the backyard. She was hanging a load of freshly washed sheets on the clothesline, using those ubiquitous wooden clothespins that later I would make things out of for arts and crafts. As I walked up the sidewalk that ran alongside our house, I happened to glance down, and peeking up at me through the grass were some wild violets. I didn't even have to think about what to do. I did what any 7-year-old would do. I reached down and picked those violets, clutching them tightly in my little fingers. And here is that little, ordinary, unremarkable moment that has stayed with me the rest of my life. I ran up to Mom, who was busy hanging up those wet sheets on the clothesline, and I proudly, reverently, lovingly handed her my little ad hoc bouquet of violets. Now, I'm sure that in that moment, Mom probably would have thought herself pretty ordinary. Her hair wasn't done. She was probably just wearing an ordinary house dress, maybe an apron. And for Pete's sake, she was hanging the laundry. But to me, that day, and in my memory ever since, she is gloriously beautiful. Honestly, I think about that day at least a couple of times a week, and I have for 6 decades. And every spring, if I happen to be out walking and glance down and see some wild violets growing, I can't help but think of giving them to my beautiful Mom hanging the laundry. You know how psychologists say to go to your happy place? Well, that day, that moment, that is my happiest of happy places.